Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has pulled US troops away from the Turkish-Syrian border. He's effectively given the green light to Turkey to invade Kurdish land.
The loss of life here that the Kurds suffered under ISIS is roughly equivalent proportionally to the loss of life and destruction that the UK suffered during the Second World War.
They deserve to be able to live in peace with their identity as Kurdish people, and surely that isn't too much to ask in the 21st century.
For years, the Kurdish people of northern Syria have battled the worst elements of ISIS and al-Qaeda, with little ground support from the West. Now, Donald Trump has abandoned the region and Turkish forces have moved in. They say to combat terrorism and relocate refugees. But the reality of their invasion is already becoming clear. Jihadists rearming, Kurds and other Syrians killed, and the peace the Rojava revolution had brought to a small part of Syria destroyed. Macer Gifford, not his real name, is a former fighter with the Kurdish YPG international brigades.
I came to Syria in 2014. I worked in the city of London in an ordinary job working 9 to 5. I saw the rise of ISIS and its brutality. These people were butchering the people of Syria, selling women into sexual slavery, shooting men and boys in ditches. The Battle of Raqqa was brutal. I was there for 4 months in 2017. It was street-to-street fighting, doorway to doorway, alleyway to alleyway. There were IEDs everywhere, sniper nests everywhere. 600 SDF fighters were killed on the streets alone. These are the British men that fought against the Islamic State and were killed. Many of these people were my friends. Luke Rutter, who was killed by an IED. You've got Ryan Locke as well. His story is particularly tragic because at the age of 22, he was surrounded by the Islamic State and he turned his weapon on himself with his last bullet because he didn't want to be captured alive. To be captured by the Islamic State is a particular horror. Everyone who went to Syria carried with them a grenade, a bullet, to take their own life. Because the Islamic State would torture you before killing you. And we went to Syria because we wanted to help. And we knew that we would risk our lives. But what we didn't want to do was be captured by ISIS, because that truly would be a fate worse than death. I carried with me at all times a grenade. I slept with it, I had it on me at all times. It was a 0-second fuse, so it would explode immediately. So I was prepared to do that. So all of these people made a huge amount of sacrifices, and they're truly honoured by the Kurdish community in Britain. Our greatest allies on the ground are the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. Alongside Britain and America, they went to Raqqa to liberate it from the Islamic State. These people have suffered so much because of the recent fighting. 11,000 SDF fighters were killed, 700 in Raqqa alone. The Islamic State wants to destroy Syria and Iraq, and it was actually local people, not the United States, that defeated them. These people believe in secular democracy. They are the real inheritors of Syria. These are the Syrian people. President Erdogan of Turkey is rolling back the secular state. He has close links with the Muslim Brotherhood and intends to advance Turkey's interests in Syria at the expense of the Syrian people. They also work alongside proxies, many of whom have links to al-Nusra, which is literally al-Qaeda in Syria. Their widespread use of airstrikes and artillery has already killed hundreds of people in Afrin and other parts of Syria. British people should care because this is about people's lives. We fought ISIS for 4 years. We finally defeated them in 2019. Now, while children should be in school, they are now enduring airstrikes. They're enduring terrible fighting that could easily have been avoided. We've repaid the SDF by throwing them to the wolves.
Dani Ellis is another British volunteer attracted to the Kurdish political project, but has not taken up arms.
Yeah, I'm Dani. I've been in Syria for coming up to 10 months now.
Can you then explain the significance of Donald Trump's orders to withdraw American troops along the Turkish-Syrian border?
It's a disaster. It's a catastrophe. It's the loss of life here that the Kurds and the other people living in northern Syria suffered under ISIS is roughly equivalent proportionally to the loss of life and destruction that the UK suffered during the Second World War. And something like 11 or 12,000 soldiers died, 20 or 30,000 were seriously wounded, have life-changing injuries. And tens of thousands of civilians died, and there's hundreds of thousands of people living with permanent scars as a result. And this is a country that in terms of population, is smaller than South London. Like it's something like 3 people, I think. And for me, like I think the most compelling thing is when you're studying this place, when you're looking at how society is organized, it provides this like really beautifully inspiring picture of this other world that's possible, that we've lost sight of, that perhaps people imagined when, for instance, the NHS was being formed, maybe in the 1970s, but really have lost sight of since Thatcherism. A society that's based on personal family connections to businesses, cooperative businesses, that, I mean, there is no state here, and it's self-organizing. The cities, the counties, the communes, the lowest level of the smallest unit of organization, these have the power, not some central government. This is really inspiring. I think, particularly given the political situation in the UK at the moment, I think it's really more relevant than ever. It shows that you can engage with democracy in a way that's not just limited to a ballot box. It's not just limited to signing petitions. Like, people here are well aware that you have to engage with democracy on a daily basis, and the society is structured from the ground up to do this. It's the most inspiring thing I've ever seen. I've been inspired 1,000 times over by every section of the society, and whilst it's certainly not perfect at all, I think, given the resources, given the time, this could be the future of humanity here. This is why I gave everything up and gave up a comfortable life in the UK and left my friends behind to come here. And I think any average person in the UK who looked at this would be just as inspired as I was. I think the number one thing you can do to help is simply to talk about this place, and is to describe what's happening here, to get an idea of what's happening, but then to describe to people what's happening. Because it is, I think if you describe to any decent, moral, sympathetic person what's happening here, they will be enraged, they will be livid. The reality of the situation here is very different to what's been described, for instance, by the Turkish press, that they are coming here to clear out these terrorists and install like a beautiful, peaceful springs of peace, they're calling this operation. The reality of the situation is, and this isn't propaganda from here. This is something which is open, has been admitted by the Turkish government, and has been proven, for instance, by these open source intelligence groups like Bellingcat, like the Rojava Information Center. Turkey has taken elements of what is now called the Free Syrian Army, former members of groups like Al-Nusra Front, like Al-Qaeda, like Daesh, ISIS. It's taken them from the areas to the west of the country, such as Idlib province and around the occupied Afrin area. It's taken these people who are known Islamist militants who were involved in horrendous atrocities across Syria, who are documented as being involved in these atrocities. It has put them in Turkish uniforms. It's given them Turkish weapons. It's trained them. It's paid them, and they're now under its command, and they're being used as proxies. There are at least 15,000 of them. So they're supported by the Turkish Air Force, by Turkish heavy armor and artillery, and they've been pushed through the border into one of the most peaceful parts of the whole of the Middle East. And they are now wreaking destruction on the very place that the same people were defeated by the Kurds, who lost 11,000 people defeating them 5 or 6 years ago in this particular region, Serikani. Like, it is outrageous. It's completely, it's infuriating that a NATO country, a highly developed, advanced economy, a NATO country of 100 million people, that Britain is begging for a trade deal with, who Britain supplies jet engines for their aircraft, supplies attack helicopters to, who supplies bombs and laser targeting pods to, is literally using members of Al-Qaeda and ISIS to kill Kurdish, Arabic, Syriac, a whole host of other democratic forces in this region who were, until just last week, our closest allies in the Middle East. And the British government have got almost nothing to say about it. The European Union couldn't put out a statement. The UN Security Council were vetoed from putting out a statement. It's one of the greatest injustices in modern history. And I think any thinking, sympathetic person, when they understand this, when they see this, and when they realise that actually this is all documented, it's all proven, and most of it is openly admitted by the Turkish state, will be just as angry as I am.
So, do the UK's political leaders care about the crisis? I asked Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn. There's fresh conflict in the Middle East this week. Turkey has invaded northeastern Syria, Kurdish lands. We've seen airstrikes, artillery, civilian casualties. Would the Labour Party support sanctions against Turkey to stop that action taking place?
Yes, we would go straight away to the UN, which has partly happened, to demand a ceasefire. And I think in the event of no ceasefire, then you have to start talking about what economic and other actions one would take against the Turkish government to stop this. The reality is a peace process within the region, a peace process that brings about a ceasefire in Syria, has to recognise the multiplicity of complexities, if you like, of the Syrian state, but also the rights of Kurdish people, which have been denied ever since the end of the First World War, not just in Syria, but also in Turkey. And as one who represents a community where there are many Kurdish people, I just feel so sad and so angry about the way the Kurdish people are now being treated. They deserve to be able to live in peace with their identity as Kurdish people. And surely that isn't too much to ask in the 21st century.
Because they're a beacon of secular democracy in what is otherwise a swamp of dictators. They should be our allies, shouldn't they?
Well, every country could be our allies who are going to support the ideas of peace, democracy, and the multiplicity of that society, the diversity of that society. And I think that the behaviour of Turkey in invading the Kurdish area in the north is absolutely appalling.
Would the Labour Party consider implementing a no-fly zone or committing the British Armed Forces
What
to the
we
area?
would do is work through the United Nations to bring about a ceasefire, and I think it's at that point there has to be a multilateral approach to it. And that means bringing together Russia with the European Union and obviously through the UN Security Council. Let's not get involved in another war, let's get involved in peace.